On today's episode, we'll talk about being part of the camera family, True Grit, No Country for Old Men, working with Roger Deakins and the Coen Brothers, and of course, winning the 8th grade St. Stanislaus Middle School Geography Bee. Just a little bit of business before we start. There may be a curse word here or there in this episode, so please listen responsibly. As always, our website, theop.io, is up and chock full of tips, tricks, and gooey operator goodness. Make sure to check out the breakdown, where the best operators in the biz explain shots they have done, the musings, where we discuss everything from quick tips to larger concepts of storytelling, the answers, the images, and so much more. I may or I may not take a break or two during this episode, but I promise that none of them will be longer than 22 seconds. Finally, if you are enjoying the podcast, please follow us, write a review, share us with your parents, and talk us up around the water cooler with your friends. So grab a beverage, sit back, and enjoy the op. Thanks for listening.
Lock it up, nice and quiet, and let's roll.
Rolling. Victor 30 Echo, take 2.
Hey, Margaret. Hey, Mark.
And camera set. And action.
Hello and welcome back to the Op Podcast, the podcast where we talk about operating and the art of visual storytelling. I am your host, Dave Comides, and coming to you from that thing the kids love, the internets, with a very good friend of mine who's also a great technician and actually is becoming an amazing operator, which we'll talk about. Liza Bambenek, who is in New Mexico. She's worked on a lot of things, but I'll just throw a couple of things out there. Dark Winds, The Harder They Fall, where we work together. The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, Hail Caesar, Sicario, No Country for Old Men, which she was listed apparently as Liza Winterpants Bambenek, which I want to find out about. And just because I think it is important, and she mentioned it, she did win the 8th grade geography bee in her school. So I think that's kind of cool. And at the end, I may just throw out some random country and ask you where it is. So
to be clear, you asked me if I'd ever won any awards, and that was the only one I could think of. Okay.
I think it's much cooler than anyone else. How you doing? Thanks for being here today, or being today.
Thanks for having me. Nice to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. It's been a while. When did we work on Harder They Fall? How long ago was that?
That was the first movie after the pandemic. So
yeah, right.
The end of 2020 was
2020. Good Lord. Yeah.
Yikes.
And I came out to New Mexico and we all saw 2/3 of our faces for 3.5 months. It was an
incredibly weird job for so many reasons. Yeah.
It was a very weird job, but it was a fun job. And I'll tell you something that maybe you know this, but I'm just jumping right in. Originally, Sean Bobbitt was supposed to shoot the show. And actually, for anybody who doesn't know, we were there for I was there for 2 days. You were probably prepping a little sooner.
Prepping for a couple of weeks. By that point.
A couple of weeks. Okay, so you'd been on a couple of weeks. I was on it 2 days, and then Netflix called us in and it was yeah, we're shutting down for a week, and all of us were yeah, it's not going to be a week. But
meanwhile, Sean said, "Pack your bags."
Yeah, and Sean was just so we're clear, and Sean's a very smart man, and he was right. But no, the reason I mention it is because when he called me and he said, "Hey, it's New Mexico and it's Santa Fe and blah blah blah," and I don't know how or why, but I called the great Andy Harris, who you know very well, who's one of the best ACs out there and now an operator, great operator. And I said, "Hey, you and Mr. Deakins have done quite a few things in New Mexico. Who do I get?" And he said, "Liza Bambenek." I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, she's not available." And he goes, "She's the one you want." And I was just "So no other names?" And he's like, "Nope, that's it. You can't do better." And I was just okay. And he was absolutely right. So I'll just
thank you.
Start that off with that.
I owe a lot to that man. I owe a lot to Andy.
He's great. So tell me, how'd you get here? What's your story? How'd you become a first AC in New Mexico?
Well, after winning the illustrious St. Stanislaus Middle School Geography Bee in 8th grade.
Excellent. Do you remember was there a winning country?
Yes.
Or
what
was
the winning
it?
question was, what is the deepest body of water in North America?
Ooh.
And it's Crater Lake.
Okay, I would not have known that. That's very impressive. I had just read
a story about how if you drop a bowling ball off of a boat, it takes an hour to hit the bottom or something. And
seriously?
So I just remembered the thing about the bowling ball, and it's how things just stick in your head. I don't even think I was necessarily great at geography. I just remembered the bowling ball.
That's awesome. Well, I'm going to cut that part out because we don't want the people from the geography who lost to come back and be upset with you.
It's fine. They can come back.
No, I liked starting there. So, and then you just went into assisting from there, and that was pretty
directly. Yeah, it's a common path most people take. No, I was always interested in cameras and photography. I grew up with a dad who was a photographer, kind of a small town commercial photographer, portrait photographer, kind of anything. And he had a studio that I worked in, answering phones every now and then. Mostly was probably there just as a babysitting tactic. I would go and hang out with him in his studio. And
Oh, so this was his job. He was a professional photographer.
yeah,
Oh, cool.
and we had a darkroom in our basement, and it was during a time of film, clearly, and he would come home and develop film and print proof sheets at night. And so I spent a lot of time. If I wanted to hang out with my dad after supper, that's where I would get to hang out with him. So I did a lot of sitting in the darkroom, pulling prints between the trays of, stop bath and all that.
That's
kind of
really
stuff.
cool. My dad actually, he was an amateur photographer, but he had a dark room in the basement.
Yeah.
And I remember being down there, and the thing that I loved was like agitating
Yep.
I don't even know what,
the sound of the tray moving and the
totally.
red
You had to like
light
pick it up and put it down and all that,
without
and just
spilling it.
Yeah, exactly. And it smelled nasty. But I
Yeah.
just remember like watching the photo emerge and how and there was that whole thing of like, I think you had to stop at a certain point because it was like overdeveloped or whatever.
Yep.
But I actually, I don't know about if you feel this way, but like I think a part of my understanding of visuals is like that early, some of it anyway, is that early like watching those images and sort of going like, oh, there's a corner and there's I don't know, there's got to be something there, right?
There's really nothing more magical. And when I was probably elementary school when I first started hanging out with him and being trusted to be there with him and not spill something or mess it up. But really, like, you'd set a timer and it would just be white, and you would wait and wait and wait. And then out of nowhere, there it goes. And it was,
so cool.
Absolutely magical. So I'm sure that had something to do with it. But having said that, he never really kind of forced photography on me. It was just something that I was just around and loved. And also, just more than that, I think I just loved movies. I loved TV shows. I lived and died by my episodic things that I got to watch every day. We had a tiny little like 15-inch black and white TV and got like 2 channels. But I loved those things. My mom took me to my first movie at the movie theater, which was Time Bandits.
No way.
And that kind of blew my mind. I also think, I was terrified, actually. I don't know if you should bring a kid to that. I don't know. I forget how old I was.
How old were you? Yeah.
I'm trying to remember, but I remember being scared that horses were going to crash through my closet doors after that. And
no, it was a little freaky. It was a dark kids movie.
Yeah,
sure.
But it made an impact for sure. And then, after that, she took me to E.T., which, that kind of solidified it for me. I made her take me to that movie 3 times.
Yeah.
And at the end of the 3rd screening, I'm bawling when the spaceship takes away. Spoiler alert, anybody who hasn't seen it. And I'm crying, and my mom's just like, how it's going to end. What's the problem? And I'm just, it was, I was so like, I found I was just so moved by, an alien leaving a little boy, and just, I don't know, something kind of struck with me. And then,
that's awesome.
So I think that grabbed me for sure, and realizing that there were people making these things and cameras and equipment that did that. I always sort of had this dream of being on a crane and riding through the sky, and I was like, that's probably the most amazing thing in the world.
Did you at that time go, oh, people make this and I want to figure out how to be part of that? Or was it a longer
little
process?
bit, yeah. And I was also sort of in the era where kind of video cameras were emerging, like little high 8 cameras, and my neighbors, the Bizances, I'm probably eternally grateful to them for putting like the first moving picture camera in my hand, besides my grandpa, who also had one. But, on like snow day, I grew up in Minnesota. So on a snow day, we would hang out with each other and, play Nintendo in the basement and make movies. And we did a bunch of silly, stupid things that sort of solidified the how do you piece this together, and editing and all that kind of stuff. So
That's
and
great.
Then, I don't know, I went to a high school that had a math and science academy, and I went into this track of going to this academy, and most people that left that academy became like geneticists and doctors. And I was interested in all of it. I loved biology, but I didn't think that was ultimately where, like, I thought maybe being a surgeon would be pretty cool. But I graduated from that academy, had to make the decision where to go to school. And I tried to decide tried to find a school that could do like pre-med as well as filmmaking. and it's sort of hard to find a school that does both. That wasn't, $1 million. And after my first semester in school, I formally switched over to being a moving image arts major. I went to the College of Santa Fe very
Oh
randomly.
wow. Wait, is that the
And
one? Is that the one that's sort of
yeah,
defunct now? That
yeah, totally.
was that
It's
where that was where our
we
offices
prepped.
were, right?
Yes, it's where our
Wow.
offices were. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's so
and
weird.
we shot Manhattan in like the back
Yes, you
of it. It's
did.
like our sets were built there. Oh
Because
wow.
they were
Oh,
old barracks. Yeah, it was a really weird school. It's very random how I landed there. I think it was random how a lot of people landed there, but it was. I think I grew up in a pretty small white town, and it was probably one of all the schools I looked at, kind of the most interesting and different from where I grew up. And I think I made a highly uneducated choice, but very emotional choice to go somewhere that felt different and challenging. And
cool.
so anyway, formally switched my major over. And after the first year of college, you come back to the academy and you say, how was your first year of school? How are things going? And so I meet with my two professors, and they take me out to like Chinese food in the mall or something in my hometown. And they're like, what are you up to? And I was like, well, I've actually switched my major to film. And I was a little nervous. I felt like maybe I was going to be letting somebody down or whatever. And it was the summer that Twister had come out, the first Twister. And all they could talk about was Twister and the cool special effects and the visual effects. And like, we spent the whole lunch talking about Twister, and they could give a shit that I wasn't a geneticist.
That's great.
Yeah. So that and my parents were incredibly supportive. Whatever you want to do, that you always were very supportive. Whatever you want,
That's cool.
follow your bliss. And so, yeah. And then towards the end of college, I met a documentary filmmaker named Diana Taylor, and kind of went under her wing. And I just did kind of personal assistant things for her for a while, and then became a camera assistant for her. And she ultimately took me to New York on a short film. And on that tiny little project, shooting in the farm fields of upstate New York, I met our key grip, Chris Garfile, and our script supervisor, Holly Unterberger, and they became like my best friends. And I
Oh
was
my
trying to
gosh, I know
decide.
Holly Underberger. I didn't know you know her. I love
Yeah,
Holly. Yeah.
totally. And we were all just little babies. And it was at that time that I had to decide if I was going to move to LA or New York, because I was going to do this film thing.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was kind of doing a little more documentary type work with Diana. So New York felt like the best thing to do. And moved there. And with Diana was the kind of person who would send me on jobs that I had no business being on. She had such faith in me and such confidence in me that I didn't have in myself.
Were you doing camera stuff with her? Or
Yeah.
were you just like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like pulling focus, or what were you doing?
Eventually did some assisting for her, but sometimes
Okay.
was just more of a loader or
Okay.
equipment hauler. But,
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, so I moved to New York, and she's like, here, I have a job contact for you. It's Cabin Creek Films, which is Barbara Koppel's company. And I go there, and they hire me purely because Diana's given them my name.
Awesome.
So lucky. And I worked with them for a while shooting. And I wasn't great. I had done what I had done in school, and I had been around all kinds of photography and things, but I wasn't great at lighting. I was just still learning. I was like 22 years old, she gave me a job where I went to like New Zealand and shot a documentary by myself with 4 cameras. And,
what?
I was a little, my first couple jobs that she tossed me, I was a little out of my league, but I'm sure because of that, I learned a lot.
Well, you stepped up. It's interesting that you said that, because there's this thing that I just saw that's going around the internet, and it was Philip Seymour Hoffman. And he's talking about, roles that he's taken, that he had taken. But he was saying how he liked to take things that he didn't think he could do, because it's like burning the ships and forcing the soldiers to fight or something like that. It's that thing of like, well, I guess I got to figure this out. But that's amazing. What did you do in New Zealand? What was the documentary?
It was this PBS show called Adventure Divas. They had it was sort of like a Lonely Planet sort of show. There was like a presenter, and you go around, but this particular show was just interviewing kind of amazing women each country. The first one they did was
Wow.
Cuba. We did New Zealand. They did Iran and another country, and I don't remember. So I did New Zealand, and we basically went around. We met the prime minister. We met the sailing team. We met Carrie Holm, the author. We met a bunch of really incredible. Gayleen Preston, one of the members of Parliament when she was 20.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I was just sort of going along with it. And I really could have used an AC with me, because I was like loading film, shooting Betacam, I dropped a tripod on my leg. I have a huge scar on my leg to this day, just being absolutely overloaded, but pulling it off
Yeah.
somehow. And
Wow.
I don't know if I would subscribe to the Philip Seymour Hoffman plan. That kind of thing usually terrifies me, but I think there's some merit in diving in and learning things the hard way, minus a scar on your left leg. But
Sure.
yeah. And then my roommate, who I ended up moving in with, the grip, Chris, who's now an operator, actually. And all my friends, Holly included, they were all working on like narrative work and TV shows. And I was working on documentaries that sometimes were a little depressing and serious. And I was dabbling in a little bit of each. And at some point, the people at Cabin Creek were basically like, hey, you got to kind of pick, your availability is becoming problematic, and we'd love to have somebody we can rely on a little bit more. And I eventually just said, I think I want to do the narrative work. This was literally at the end of a phone call where they were saying like, hey, can you get on a plane and fly to Jordan on Wednesday? And everything I had been doing was in New York, very domestic, and out of the blue, Barbara calls and says, can you get on a plane, go to Jordan, get in the back of a covered wagon and drive 6 hours and do this documentary about war photographers. And it was the kind of thing that as a kid, I was like, that's exactly what I want to be doing. Like, this kind of intense in the field. And then I had just started a relationship with somebody, and I was more interested in being at home. And I said no. And that was like a turning point where I turned down this experience that who knows where the heck that would have taken me, and started doing narrative stuff, did indie movies in New York. And then was on an indie job that went and joined the union, and was a loader the entire time that I lived in New York. A little bit of seconding maybe, but was a loader the entire time I lived there.
Did you did you ever look back and regret that you didn't take that documentary job?
No.
Oh.
No, I'm curious.
That's good.
I would love to see the alternate,
there's somewhere out there like
there's
life. Another Liza doing something else entirely on some other alternate plane. Yeah. But that's I mean, a lot of people, the reason I ask is because a lot of people have, moments where there's a fork in the road, but that's a pretty big fork in the road, especially like you said, at that age to everything. It's like Jordan and, war photographers and whatever. That's very cool. So were you, were you loading on like TV shows then or?
I started out in television. Once I got into the union, I got my first job. My first union job was a TV show called Deadline, which was just starting. It was sort of a American version of the Rupert Murdoch story in terms of a newspaper, and it was like a newspaper drama set in New York. And Dick Wolf thing, very kind of procedural, 7 crazy long weeks of work. And so loading film for 2-camera show, did that for a bit and ended up switching. I kind of was working with some people then, and then I switched working to other people, and those people did more features. So eventually shifted after doing a bit of television, Third Watch, the Law and Order realm of day playing. Mm-hmm. And then switched over to features just sort of by the nature of the assistants that I was working for. And
as a loader still, or were you seconding by then?
Yep. Yeah. No, I pretty much loaded the whole time I was there.
What now? I mean, and forgive me because I mean, I didn't do anything on the level that you did, but I did some quote unquote loading when I first started out. I was an assistant for a year, but it was the kind of thing where I was like the only person. So I can't really compare the two. But when you're loading on a TV show and then you go to a feature, is it sort of suddenly like, oh, I actually have like free time in between mags and I'm not constantly in the bag or whatever? Is it a totally different? Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's totally different, but it is definitely a slowing of pace. I mean, you're rolling, yes and no, but mostly yes.
Well, the reason that I ask is it seems like on TV, especially, and maybe I'm wrong because I actually never worked on anything like Dick Wolf show when it was shot on film, so I'm not quite sure. But I would just think that there's so much loading with 2 cameras and now it'd be now, so it's digital, but I was going to say with 3 cameras, but that you probably don't get a lot of time to go, hey, how do I be a second IC? And let me go talk to the operator. But maybe on features, it's like, I'm not doing anything right now. I can go stand by the DP and watch, or, or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot less time when I was in the dark room all the time. And when I wasn't in the dark room, I was running errands. We didn't have a PA, we didn't have a utility. So it was kind of like I was the end of the line. But again, you learn a lot about time management and what your tasks are. Yeah. And at that time too, I was working for people whose dads were DPs and their dads were DPs. And so there was you do your thing and do it well. And so yeah, and when you're loading 20,000 feet of film a day and doing all the paperwork, it's a lot to do. And then when you're shooting in New York City too, it's not like the camera truck is close. Like in New Mexico, the camera truck gets parked kind of close. In New York, the grip truck is very close. And I remember I should have been wearing a pedometer as a loader. I probably would have done 10 miles a day. Just there's the loading and then there's the getting the film to the blah 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 and yes, you'd bring a bag every now and then and be closer, but
otherwise you're in the
working
truck.
in New York is a whole other animal from a lot of other places. So
I was back east for a couple of years and I worked in New York, and I just was like, I don't understand how this gets done. When I first got there, I was like, this can't work, but somehow it does. It's crazy the things that they pull off.
Just fitting a cart in an elevator, we all had Rubbermaids back then.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. It was funny because I got out there. I was like, why does everybody have Rubbermaids? And they were like, because it's the only thing that works. Trust us. Yeah, exactly. What years, like what
99 to 2007.
Okay. So by that point, I'm assuming that are there other women in these camera crews most of the time, or? Okay. On
the crew, yes. In the camera crew, usually the loader was the only girl, or the occasional. Yeah, I would say there was one, maybe two. If there were two in a crew, it would be phenomenal.
Okay.
When I first moved there, one of the first ACs I met was Claire Carrier. She had been the first AC on like Boys Don't Cry and things like that. And and then I met like Heather Norton and Nick Nas Tavakolian, who's now an operator.
Oh, yeah.
And Amy Silverman, who's out of the business now. But and like Becca Venezia, she was there. She was a second at the time. And so occasionally there were a few like lady firsts.
It was still rare back then.
Yeah, and it was also the kind of thing where I was young, and it was also just like, this is how it is, and and gradually things have taken a different direction, and it's was very noticeable when I was like not the only woman in the department.
That's kind of what I was getting at. Yeah, it was when that change did happen. It was noticeable. It was something you were cognizant
I remember looking around me and just being like, wow. And then then when I had the opportunity to create my own crews, I tried to fill it with as many women as I possibly could.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned this, but also it's not only that you're the only woman on the crew, but are these like mostly legacy people who it's like their father and their uncle? Because I found in New York there was so much of that, like everybody's in a family.
But at the same time, when I found that you're also in that family, that was the thing is, when I was welcomed into various crews, they would continue to hire you and until somebody died. And so there was also that very sweet camaraderie, and people were very loyal. But it was also the kind of thing where right when I left New York, I was so done loading. I had been a loader for 6 years. My last job loading was The Departed. I think it was almost a million feet of film. It was,
oh my gosh.
They would yell, they would say camera reloads in the walkie, and I would just be like, fuck. Like I just literally, I was that done. I actually left the job a little bit early because I was so done.
Oh, wow. What a great job to be a part of. But like, it sounds like you didn't see any of it.
And that was the kind of job too, where you're like hiking up stairway, ladders to rooftops to get mags up on top of a building. And
so you didn't go on set at some point and go, Marty, you just have to slow down. I can't handle it. Like this isn't working.
Yeah, one of the only interactions I had with him was him telling me to please be quiet. So that's all we had. But again, a phenomenal bunch of people. It was Andrew Rowlands and Tom Lappin and Carlos Guerra and Boots and Angela and Sebastian and Yes, great job to go out on, but by the end I was done. And the point that I was getting to was, unless somebody died, I was going to keep loading. And so there was an opportunity to go to New Mexico on a job on location with Aurelia Winborn, who's a first AC.
Oh, I love Aurelia. She's
Yeah,
fantastic.
and she's like, I know you have sort of a connection to New Mexico. Maybe you want to do this movie with me. And I was like, number one, New Mexico, yay. And number two, you're asking me to be a second. Awesome. And
That's
so
great.
I left with her, did a feature there. While I was there, ran into a bunch of people I knew. The incentives were just starting. There weren't a lot of camera assistants there. And I got asked by the B First to do her next movie with her. And so I ended up moving back to New Mexico, and that's how that happened.
That's great. And so how long did you second for?
I've seconded for probably 7 years, maybe.
Mostly in New Mexico, except for, obviously if you head out for whatever.
Well, I actually, I think it was even longer than that. And I went back and seconded for Andy after I bumped up a little bit, just because why wouldn't I?
For Andy Harris.
Yes, anything for
that
him.
makes sense, because I was looking at the thing and I was like, oh, first and then second, whatever. But if Andy Harris calls you and says, would you mind seconding for me? I can understand on so many levels why you'd want to do it.
It was just, and it was even more than that, just rejoining with a group of people and filmmakers that are just preferred to maybe the crap that I would be firsting on here.
What was the first movie that you worked with Andy and Roger and I don't know, and James as well at that point? I don't kind of know when
James was present, but we were still shooting film then. She definitely got more involved when it became digital.
Gotcha.
But she was always present and helping with the Lock Pro dailies.
Fantastic.
My first job with them was No Country for Old Men.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I didn't know how cool it was about to be, and is and was.
And did you know Andy before that?
Only by name. I got connected with that job through another job that I did called North Country, that Fran was in, and our first AD on that job, Liz Tan. Some sort of conversation. My name got thrown in some hat, given to the production manager, Karen Getchell, and Karen called me one day and just said, "Hey, we're coming to town to do this movie. But first we're going to do these camera tests in Texas. We're just wondering initially if you can come and help us do these camera tests in Texas since you're close. And we're going to be shooting in Texas, New Mexico. We're not sure yet." And I got on a plane and flew to El Paso. And that's where I met Andy at the rental car desk at the El Paso airport. And I don't know if camera assistants just look a certain way, but I was like, there he is. I know that's the guy. And then we got in a rental car for 4 hours to drive to Marfa, Texas. And I was like, this could be the worst 4 hours of our lives, or this is going to go okay.
Yep.
And Andy, having been from the East Coast, we had a lot of people in common. Whether or not I had worked with them, I at least knew them. And so there was instantly sort of okay, you're passing at least the first test of, you know who Eric Swan. You know who Eric Swanek is.
You know who Eric Swanek
is. And we literally pulled into Marfa, Texas, went to a restaurant, and we walk in, and there's the brothers and Roger, and I'm just kind of like, oh my freaking God, what is happening?
Okay, this is what I wanted to ask you. So I mean, is that look? I worked a little bit with Roger, and I worked a little bit with Joel. And just working with them alone, I was, oh my God. But to walk in and see that group together and you're in rarefied air there. What's that like?
I don't know if I ate much, but I just kind of sat and observed. I didn't know that I felt worthy sitting at the table, but
it's so funny.
I knew that this was a moment that I got to at least just sit here and observe them, even, just for these tests. And basically we drove around in a van for 3-4 days. It was when the Master Primes had just come out, and Roger had previously just used the Cooks. And so we were comparing and contrasting these two lens sets. And it was Roger, Andy, and me, and this crazy, toothless Teamster driving us around the wilds of nowhere, Texas.
Fantastic.
Shooting at all hours of the day. And if you watch that movie, the opening sequence is actually all the lens tests of all like the light popping
No
over the
way.
hills, and
Really?
most of those landscapes are the lens tests that we did.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah,
I love
and
I love
then
the fact that even the lens tests are worthy of being in the movie.
yeah,
Right?
right. And then yeah, the
That's
last night
great.
of the last night of the tests, we had a dinner together, and I feel like Andy said something like, "Well, Roger, what do you think?" Gesturing towards me or something, and he was just like, "Well, I think this will work out. Like, we could ride in a van together for 4 days and not have any issues." And
Yeah. I was just
and
going to say it's interesting because those scout, especially if you're somewhere like, Texas or even New Mexico, where you're driving like hours to get to some, beautiful vista or whatever. Those van rides can be very telling and you
yeah,
learn a tremendous amount about people because like, you don't end up talking about like movies. You end up talking about just life and whatever. It's kind
yeah,
of fascinating. But I think those are where most of a lot of times those are where these things get solidified or
yeah,
don't actually on the other level.
yeah.
That's
What?
amazing. That
Yeah, there was a moment. Just silly anecdote, but Roger had forgotten some in his hotel room, and I had to go in and grab it for him. And while I was in the room, I was like, should I look in his closet or not? Because he wears a white shirt and jeans and boots every day.
like
And
thinking there would just be like 100 white shirts, 100
yeah,
jeans,
and then just out of my own curiosity, I was just like, fuck it. And I swing open the thing, and sure enough, there's like 4 shirts, 4 pants. And I was just
That's
like,
great.
this is excellent. Yeah. And I came back out, and here's your thing, and I totally wasn't snooping in your clothes closet.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's
You
fantastic.
know,
That's great. That's really great.
yeah. Again, I'm in my 20s, and I'm like, fuck it, who cares?
Yeah, yeah. Coen Brothers, good to work with. What's that like?
The best, really.
Yeah.
I think there is. I mean, I was a fan of their films before I ever thought I would work with them.
Yeah.
And I'm from Minnesota. They're from Minnesota. I have the same birthday as Joel. I always felt like someday maybe there would be some kismet opportunity, and here it was. And
That's cool.
I always found that I find that they are probably some of the best communicators that I've worked with in terms of we're always trying to explain how we want something done on set, a movement, a mood, a reaction, how a word is pronounced. And when they come to the table and give notes to an actor or a camera or whatever, it's always unmistakably clear what they want.
Really?
And I'm always just like, how it's just sort of a mastery of language. I think it's a mastery of regionalisms and ideas.
Wow.
And I just feel like I was always just so fascinated by every little note that they'd give because it was just, there was no mistaking what they wanted. And
Really?
I think they're exceptional at that. And
That's
incredibly kind
amazing.
and calm. And on their sets, nobody's yelling. There's no need to be rushing or screaming. They're well planned. They're well run. You get the storyboards in the beginning of the day, and you literally hold the storyboard up to the camera, and the frame is almost identical. And you're invited to be part of the visual storytelling. You don't just get the verbal sides, but it's pretty magical. And they, I spoke to Joel once, and he said, once we've gotten to set, we've already made the movie in our heads, and filming it is actually one of the least interesting parts of doing it because we've made it, we've written it, we've storyboarded it, we've seen it in our heads. And, this is my quote from my interpretation of what he said, but it was basically just like, we've already made it, and here we are just assembling it.
That's really cool. That's really
I mean,
cool.
so many times now I feel like the standard is you get to set and everyone's like, all right, how should we do this? And you're like, are you fucking kidding me?
Yep.
Somebody gave you $20 million and you've had 2 years and you don't know what we're doing right now, So the epitome of them to me is the planning, the communication, the clarity, and they tell a good fucking story. And I think they're hilarious. And I like what they do with like the regionalisms of language and speech and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah.
It's an absolute honor if anyone ever has the opportunity to be in the presence of people who are filmmakers like them. I think you learn the quote unquote, not even quote unquote, I think you learn the right way to do it.
I could not agree with you more. I mean, I was lucky enough to do some work on Macbeth with Joel and Bruno Delbonnel, and
Hmm.
it was one of those things. And I mean, by then I've been doing this 30 years, so you know a little bit.
Yeah.
But you walk in and you're like, oh, these people are like so on top of their
Yeah.
game,
And
and
they,
yet there's still things where it's like, really, is this the way this works? Like, I thought this would be totally different. And then you're like, oh no, this is like, this makes perfect sense. I mean, and again, I think it was probably, and I don't know, because I've never worked with Joel and Ethan, and from what I understand, I think it sounds like they're a little bit of like two parts of a whole, almost like they finish each
totally.
other's thoughts and whatever. So I think what Joel was sort of working out that, oh, I've got to do the whole, like there's not
Yeah.
someone else fit, because it's the first thing they'd ever done without him. So, but it was fascinating, and it really was one of those like, oh, this is what I've been working towards all this time, to be able to work with like this caliber of people. And yet, I will say this, because it was probably a lot of people you worked with, because they tend to keep that family together, assuming they're available. But it was very much like, these are the nicest,
Yeah.
most efficient, most intelligent, like, just wonderful filmmakers. Like,
Yeah.
everything should be this way. It's just fantastic. It's
Yeah.
all about making a better film, and
And that was going
telling
to
a
be
better
my
story.
follow up to that is they have the same group of people around them. And from film to film, they've had the same sound mixer for 30 years, if not
Yep.
more, and just everybody. And there's something to having a common vocabulary, a common understanding of this is how we do it. And yeah, that's the other lovely thing about working with them is you get to work with the 80 other amazing people that they surround themselves with.
Yeah, well, it is, and it seems to me from talking to Andy Harris that it's like they've sort of picked these people over the years, and like you said at the end of the movie, Roger's looking at Andy and going, "What do you think?" And it's like, everybody sort of has to pass the test, but once you pass the test, like you're part of the family, which
Yeah.
is, I mean, how could it be better than that?
It's I feel incredibly lucky. Incredibly
Does
lucky.
that end up spoiling you on other movies, where, because most
Absolutely.
movies are not that way? And so,
Absolutely. I mean, I
you
don't
want
know
to
if
take a
you've
minute and think about that?
no, absolutely. I think that's most people's response is this will spoil me. And then you go and
Yeah,
work on something else and you're like, hey, I know a way we could do this that actually
yeah, yeah,
might work out. And
yeah,
yeah, you get spoiled, but that's the kind of thing, right? You work on 10 things that are really difficult and you get that one winner of a project and it makes it really special.
yeah. And
And
was Randy Johnson the boom operator on that?
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
assumed
And when I was
he
a second, he and I were thick as thieves,
he is the
especially.
best.
Yeah.
He is absolutely the best.
Goofball.
I did early on. I had him in to talk to him on the podcast, and I've worked with him, but we never sat down and talked much. And it was just like, he's just such a wonderful, wonderful guy, and
Yeah.
and so good at what he does. So let me ask you this: when you get, so you do No Country for Old Men, and then you
Hmm.
get called for the tier 2 movie, and that just happens to be what's going on, so you take it. Like, what's the mental game of going, because there's got to be that part of you that goes, okay, it's unfair of me to go in and expect this to be like that, and get frustrated. So how do you do that? Or don't you? Are you terrible at
um,
that?
well, like I said before, I think we all do a very healthy mix of great things and things that we wish we never have had to have done. I think I started out in TV. I started out working with some people who were kind of screamers, and that makes you want to like never be a screamer. You get our lives are completely determined by who calls us randomly. I'd like to think people are always like, oh, tell me about your career, and I'm like, I'd like to think that everything that I did was because of something else that I very specifically planned, but it's very random. It's so incredibly random. And sometimes that randomness leads you to the most gorgeous experience. And other times, and you gradually sort of distill your way to what people and places might provide a better opportunity. But otherwise, sometimes a job is a job. So, we all have mortgages, we all have bills we want to pay, trips we want to take, and sometimes the time frame of a job that fits in with your plans and your life and what you want to do is a more important decision than it necessarily being an Oscar-winning project. And at the end of the day, like, you and I do the work, and then the film kind of has its wings and goes off and becomes what it is. Sometimes it's hard to tell. Even with the most amazing ingredients, it can be the shittiest film you've ever seen, and it doesn't even get released. And so I think I try to, from the onset, at least select from what I can select, knowing what I know. And then after that, it's kind of up to you to make that experience what it is. And, barring some absolute bad apple in the crew, but I have no qualms about working on anything. I feel very lucky to get to do what I do for a living. It's because of some shitty project somewhere that I got to do some other project that led me to the next project that led me to getting that call that day. So I feel like that's something I definitely tell people is like, you never know what's going to come from another job. The tiniest little thing to meeting one person here, they remember your name and randomly pass it on. You have no idea. So,
I think you're
grateful
right.
to get to keep working.
Yeah, and sometimes I'll do the same thing, which is like you're on some horrible project, and like you said, it's Don Devine. I don't know if you know Don. He's an operator here in LA, great operator, and he gets off the phone with a job, and his wife goes, making the deal, and his wife goes, "Is this art or groceries?" He's like, "This is groceries."
Yeah,
and he goes, "Here's the thing: you gotta do the grocery jobs because you gotta eat, and occasionally you get the art job, and that keeps you going." But but then again, like you said, I think every show you just sort of go, all right, this is groceries, but I'm gonna work on this aspect of something, or I'm getting to work with the second that I love, or whatever it is, and you sort of capitalize on that, if you will.
Yeah, I mean the people are everything, for sure.
Yeah. What's your favorite experience with the Coen Brothers? Because you have done a number of them.
Gosh, Dave. Could have given me these questions ahead of time.
No, because then you would think about it ahead of time. Come on, you just gotta go with it.
Well, sometimes it's the most random. Sometimes it's the most random things. But one time we were on No Country. We were out in Marfa, and it was right before we were about to break for lunch. And like, we just need to quick get this shot of Josh walking across the horizon. It's this wide shot, Josh walking left to right. And so most of the crew breaks, gets in the vans, and we set up camera on sticks, action. Josh starts to walk, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, these gigantic plumes of black fluid start shooting up behind the mountain behind him, the hill. And Mitch Lilly in the key grip goes, let me get on the phone 1 second. And There Will Be Blood was also shooting in Marfa at the same time. And their set was right behind it. And literally there's these oil derricks spewing. Mitch gets on the phone and he's just like, I forget who the effects guy was, but he was just like, yeah. Can you guys just hold? What do you do? They're testing the derricks, guys. 1 second. And then he just says, can you just turn them off? We just got to get this last shot. We're trying to go to lunch. So all of a sudden, the oil goes down. We roll the shot. We get it. Okay, that's lunch. And then we all turn away and the oil derricks go off again. And it was just kind of like, what world am I in?
Well, you know what?
I'm hopping in a van with these people that I look up to and adore. Yeah. And like, this has just happened. And I'm just like, what? I was just, it's so surreal. It's so surreal.
What a great story. And I was going to say, you know what world you're in? You're in the world where Mitch Lillian is your key grip and has probably thought ahead of time. Oh, but I know that they're filming over there. And who is that? Okay, in case something goes on, because that's who he is. He's fantastic.
Well, Mitch is the reason I was winter pants in the credits.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. And the fact that it says that on IMDb makes me think that it probably says it in the credits. Does it say it in the credits?
Yeah.
And what's? I mean, I'm assuming it's winter pants, and that's the way Mitch Lillian would say it. So,
that is correct.
What does that mean?
We did a lot of nights on that job, and in the desert, even in the summer, it gets kind of chilly at night, and I got cold, and I didn't have long pants. I was wearing shorts, so I put on my rain pants, And as I was running around everywhere, they kept making this sound, and Mitch, who is one of those guys who like eternally wears shorts,
Yep. That's true.
Not to say that all grips always wear shorts, but, and he was just like, "Are you wearing winter pants?" And I was just like, these are my rain pants. And like, he says it as he's walking past Joel and Ethan, and Ethan's like, "Winter pants." And Joel goes, "Winter pants." And then it just kept getting repeated like this weird game of telephone until I finally just took them off because I was just like, "Shut the hell up." And then it just stuck.
Yep. That's great. And it made it into the credits. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
But by the way, what a, wait, no, and which that was on No Country?
Yeah.
Okay. But by the way, I mean, when the movie comes out, what a perfect way to know that you're part of the family. I mean, right?
Yeah.
You know, that's fantastic. I saw
to
that.
This day, yeah.
That was just great. So when did you start firsting? I mean, full-time, quote unquote, with the exception of going back to work with Andy if it came up.
I started firsting on a TV show called Longmire that was filmed in New Mexico. It was, I started as a second on the show. And I think season 4, the guy that I had been seconding for left to go do the Breaking Bad sequel, Better Call Saul or something. Yes. He had an opportunity to be a key first and took it. And I was able to bump up. And that is a rough transition. But
that's what I wanted to ask you about. What's the, I mean, obviously I would think focus pulling is the hardest part in just the mental, but what's the mental head game of like suddenly, oh, everybody's watching me and they, I mean, because it's like, it's in or it's out. I mean, it's off or it's on, right? It's you're good or you're bad.
Well, conveniently, like as the seconds on that show, if we ever had a C camera, we would take turns bumping up.
Okay. Good.
And so there were opportunities to at least become familiar and try and get used to what it was like and be trusted that like, okay, she knows what she's doing.
Yeah.
For me, it was just more, yes, technically it was difficult at times. Sometimes I felt like the long lens shots were easier than the wider lenses, which was interesting, but I got pulled aside at one point and was told like, "Hey, we need to kind of work on a couple of things." And I said, "Yeah, I'm well aware." I too am looking at this screen that you were looking at. And, but yeah, it was just time and practice. And on an episodic, you're just hammering out 10 pages a day and 4 company moves a day. And so in addition to all your focus pulling and technical work, you're also carrying a camera up a mountain and loading a truck and unloading a truck. And so it just took some time. But I would say the first season that I did it was very clearly a learning experience for me. And thankfully, people kept me around. And, you have to let people make mistakes, but not at the cost of what you're making. And there are certain jobs that are a great place to be a learner. And there are other jobs that you would be canned in an instant. And I was lucky enough that I had an established family of people that I was working with.
Yeah.
Jimmy Muro and Cameron Duncan were the DPs.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And the assistants that I worked with, Dominic Bartoloni was the A first, Todd Avery. Just all of those guys stuck their necks out for me ultimately. And
that's great. That's wonderful.
And then we carried on and managed to hold my own and continue through the 6th season when it ended.
And how long did it take you until you would go into work and go, I can do the job today. Like, I'm not worried. I'm not freaking out that they're going to throw something at me.
I mean, probably well past that job. I mean, I think there's an element of being concerned about how you're going to do that is prohibitive. And there's an element of it that makes you do a good job and concentrate and focus. Mm-hmm. So I'd say it took several years. Certainly, certainly for the past few years, it's the kind of thing where I can show up to work and the last thing I'm worried about is if it's going to be in focus or not. It's scheduling or hiring somebody or finding somebody to cover this person or whatever. It becomes more comfortable, but it took me several years to not absolutely have a sleepless night before a first job or just pull my hair out if I saw him setting up a shot that I was like, oh fuck,
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Well,
and then and as I've talked about before too, it's just like technology has improved and throwing, I didn't have a light ranger on Longmire. I was using a Cinetape. And
the digital things that sort of tell you how far things
correct.
are away. So
Thank you.
can,
And the Cinetape would just give you numbers on the side of a display.
yeah, so you can check yourself basically. You still have to pull focus, but at least you have some like backup, I
and
guess.
then and the light ranger had just come out, and I got to try it out like on the last season. I was just like, are you kidding me? I could have been doing this job. There's no rehearsals. The actors didn't like to put down marks. We didn't use marks on Longmire.
Well,
so
nobody does now anyway. So you were getting ready for the
again,
future.
in a way, in that Philip Seymour Hoffman way, it was really helpful. So I pulled focus on a TV show for many years without marks. And
yeah. No question. So I'll tell you something. One of the, I thoroughly enjoyed working with you on so many levels on The Harder They Fall. But I remember very specifically that day where, what was that? It was anamorphic, and we had that zoom that was like 150 to 800, or what was it?
3-to-1.
Which was like, they went to like 820 or 870 or some weird number, but it was an anamorphic zoom, and it was crazy. And it was that scene where they all come riding into town, and Idris is wearing like his prison uniform with the stripes, and it's like they come around the corner and they're all fanned out, all the horses.
Oh, yeah.
And remember that we brought him up like 19 times. Yeah.
Oh my God.
And you and I are on B camera, and Mihai's on A camera, and he's doing his thing, and this and that and the other. And they would just sort of leave us alone to do, like, let's do this and let's do that. So I just started, we just started having fun with it. And I remember at one point I was like, can we throw the long zoom, and like I'll start all the way down on the end of it and just ride it out. So and I remember you were like, yeah, sure. And I was like, I don't want to throw you under the bus. And you're like, no, it'll be fine. And I think you got it on the first take, and it was a really hard shot. And I remember James, the director, came up to me and he goes, she doesn't get rattled. And I was like, no, she doesn't. And he said, would she tell you if she was in trouble? And I said, I'm not actually sure, but she doesn't really get in trouble, so it's not a problem. But that was one of the great things about that job, was like, I always knew that you were game to go, yeah, let's just go for it, and we'll do the best we can.
You're only in trouble when you get into it. Up until then, you're doing it and you're feeling it. And that shot had to be just completely feel at a certain point. And
I think I was on a dolly too. I think that's the other thing.
It was a side-to-side dolly.
It was side to side, but as I remember after, I think I tend to put things on an angle, and I think it was on an angle.
I didn't want to mention it, but you were on a diagonal, you jerk.
You could throw me under a bus, and I'm sure you were sitting there going, "Really? You couldn't just put?"
Yeah, it's like the diagonal slider of 10 degrees. I'm like, do we
exactly?
Have to do
but see,
this
the thing is, I wouldn't have done that if I was worried that you wouldn't have gotten it. Although the truth of the matter is, I probably didn't even give it a thought on any level. But there's a comfort level there. So but I remember that very specifically, and James being like, "Wow," and I was like, "Yeah, that's why we can get all this cool stuff."
You also get to know the lens that you're working with. You get, like, we spend enough time on that lens where it becomes a little less daunting.
Really?
Yeah, you get comfortable with the throw of it and how it, you are with it.
When you said, that's interesting. Are you talking about like the physics of it and how it turns and
how your hand moves at a different pace and rate with each lens and whatever ring you have on the Preston. And
that's interesting.
So for that lens, I would throw on like the E ring or something, which is the most detailed ring. And then when we were on Steadicam, I'd have the A ring on. So it's opposite ends of a throw spectrum. And so you get to move, you kind of get comfortable with both of those. On Steadicam, I would only be doing something like this.
Just turning it slightly.
Insert hand motion here. And then on that, you almost need the throw to kind of feel it more. Like you need to have a movement that you can feel as they're moving with you to really, and if so you get to feel a lens. And I learned that actually I did a Western called Appaloosa with McLean. Fred McLean was my assistant that I seconded for, and we were on a 3-to-1 all the time on film, shooting horses riding at us at 100 miles an hour. And the guy nailed it every time. And wow. he just knew how it moved. And I was just like, this is incredible. And you spend enough time with a single lens and you feel it a little
That's
better.
amazing. It makes perfect
Yeah.
sense when you explain it, but I wouldn't have thought about it. So I want to ask you something specific to operators because one of the things is you work with. I mean, you work with operators over and over again, but you also work with a lot of different operators, right? You go and you day play, or you just start a new job with another operator. So when you go in and you've run into an operator you came in and you worked with me, right? We'd never met each other before. How do you, or if you don't want to say about me, that's fine. How do you determine like if the operator knows what they're doing, if they're a good operator, if they're a great operator? Like, are there signs that you look for? And the reason I ask is because for people who are starting out, I think this is good to know, because the reality is when we come on a set, we're testing everybody from the moment we get there to sort of not to make them, but just to go, how much can I trust you, or do I need to keep an eye? I mean, we're all doing
Yeah.
that, I think, on some level, just for survival.
Yeah, it doesn't take too long to suss out what somebody is doing and what they're capable of, but I think it has to do with communication and confidence that they display, for sure. Um, I mean, we all have our moments. When I start working with an operator, I take sort of a subjective approach to what I'm watching. And I'm sort of like, oh, that's a beautiful shot. Or like, I actually just say, like, oh, did I think that was technically smooth and well framed? And like, sometimes you agree with what somebody is framing and sometimes you don't. And sometimes it has everything to do with it being right and wrong, and it has everything to do with like, we're doing this style and we're not doing this. But there's a moment in which I feel like there's a fluidity to what I'm seeing that to me indicates a good operator, that there's a complete idea. There's an A to a B and maybe a C, D, and E that makes a lot of sense. They're clearly paying attention to the story and we're getting these details. And, on TV, for example, like on B camera, the B operator is grabbing all the little details that you need to put the story together. And I would always be very impressed when they were clearly paying attention to that. And I'd be like, yes, thankfully I also read the script and I know to rack focus to the orange or whatever. And then on a feature, there's just sort of more of a longer sort of composition that I guess I can grow to appreciate. But in terms of being able to say, I don't need somebody to say, here's what I'm doing and I'm going to do it exactly. There's always going to be some variance. And sometimes that makes it more fun, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So to get to a point where you can roll with the variances, I think that makes the relationship between operator and first even better. When you're both at a level in which you can almost even throw each other off a little bit and you'll recover just fine and make something better in the middle of it. I think we even had some times on that job together where I would react to something and, it would lead you over, or maybe we'd even talked about it, but sometimes it wasn't that way. And
No, there definitely were times where it just happened because you saw
yeah,
something. And I mean, that's one of the things
of
early
course, that's
on.
how it goes.
And like I said, I mean, right off the bat, look, Andy Harris said you were good. So I was like, I'm sure you are. But after a couple of days, I was like, or probably even less than that. I think I even, said to you, like, look, if you see something, just go for it. We're B camera. So it's not like we're going to miss
Yeah.
the main part of the story. Like, let's find cool stuff. And I think, you embraced that, which was great.
Yeah.
And so when you come in, and you don't have to give any names, but if you can think of when you've come in, and hopefully it's not me, when you think of when you've come in and it hasn't been a good operator, and you realize that, like, okay, this is going to be a little challenging. Like, what are the things that you notice that are problematic, or can you give an example of things that can be problematic? Is communication it, or is it just that they're seeing equipment? Or, I mean, obviously those are some of them, but
Well, I mean, let's say we're talking about me now in how I can do my job now.
Mm-hmm.
An operator can do whatever they want to and need to do, and I'm not going to find it problematic for my job unless they say, hey, I wanted 100, and then we hike up on the top of the hill and they're like, no, just kidding, I needed this. Like that kind of communication. Like, so
Sure.
Just from the basics, ask for what you want, tell me what you want, tell me what might be a second option. Just getting that together, fine. But beyond that, like I can roll, most focus pullers, I imagine, can kind of just roll with what happens. Sadly, that's kind of where we kind of have to be ready for everything. And so at a certain point, you could do whatever you wanted, Dave, and it would be fine, and we would make it work, and we would pull it off. And that's the beauty of having some experience and some time in your seat, you know.
Sure.
I think kindness and communication are really, if kindness and communication aren't in place, there's really nowhere else we're kind of done. You know, it's not going to be enjoyable. But I find that most people, you know, worth their weight in salt these days in this business get that. And most people make a great effort to have a good vibe on set and keep things going. But I can't think of anything in particular right now, actually, just because I do feel like the way the business is these days is you roll without rehearsals, you roll without marks, you're kind of ready for everything as a first operator relationship, where I think we're usually kind of ready for everything on our end.
Unfortunately, that has become, it's weird because I say unfortunately, and I do mean unfortunately, because it was great when we could do it out, but there is sometimes occasionally things will happen that might not have happened if we had planned them out, only because we are flying by the seat of our pants. And you sometimes do actually end up getting really cool stuff that you might not have got otherwise. I still don't think it's the best way to go, because a lot of times that doesn't happen. And they're like, why didn't you do that? And it's like, because we haven't rehearsed this. They didn't even know he was going to, do that or whatever.
Yeah.
What about interacting with actors? As far as, I mean, do you have a lot of interaction with actors on these bigger movies that you do, or are you kind of like just back by the camera? Or?
I like to whatever extent it's clearly allowed, or you kind of have to read the room. Certainly, I think in the times of film when you were focus pulling, sitting on the dolly, I think you had a different relationship with the actor because you're sitting there with the operator, and there's your focus marks were even more critical then in terms of having to trust that they're doing what they've been asked to do. So I think you had a few more conversations with them then. But I think it's just general practice to just be like, hey, I'm the person back here, whether or not you can see me, who is keeping you sharp. You know, I don't this isn't my speech. I just say, hey, I'm Liza, I'm the focus puller.
I like it when you get the soapbox out and you get up and you're like,
do
everybody
you know
listen to me now. I'm talking.
You? Yeah. No, but it's when I can, a lot of times if there's a mistake, it's often my responsibility and my fault. When it's clearly something that they could help with, I will sometimes take the moment and go ask for this or that, or ask my operator to ask, or the first AD to ask, I mean, I don't know. On that show Longmire, for example, like one of the characters, we're moving really quickly through television. You don't always get a lot of feedback from your director. And there would be times when we would do this big ensemble scene and I would maybe be on his coverage or something. It was Adam Bartley. And he would look over and he'd come to me for like, what did you think? You were on my close up and we had some hand signs for what we were doing. So every now and then that everyone knows we're moving at this crazy pace. But if somebody knows like, hey, they have my coverage, sometimes an actor will come up and be like, are we, blah, blah, blah. They're not going to get feedback from somebody else, but.
Well, that's actually a tough one, right? Because there's that thing of like, especially if you have a relationship with the actor, you want to be honest with them and you want to tell, hey, I think this or whatever. But on the flip side, you're kind of crossing lines a little bit because the director should be giving the feedback.
Correct.
And the worst thing for me, I don't know if you've ever had this, but it's like, you come up and be like, yeah, it was good. What do you think? Should I try this? And it's like, yeah, give that a shot or whatever. And then the director will come up and be like, why'd you do that? And it's like, well, Dave thought, and it's just like, well, wait a minute.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was, what I'm talking about was never like that so much. I hear you. It is, it was more just like,
that's the thing is,
hey, we got it,
Well, yeah, exactly. But there are those times where they'll ask you specific things and it's like, you don't want to go, I'm not allowed to tell you, like, you don't want to be that because nobody wants to do that, but it does get weird. But so I want to go back to something you said, which is, comes up so often on this podcast, which is reading the room. And actually, I think it's 75% of our jobs on most days. It's just, so when you first do start working with an actor and as you know, there are some actors who need a lot of input. There's some actors who don't need a lot of input. There's some actors who don't want any input, on any level. And how do you determine who that person is and whether you can go up and go, hey, is there any way when you're, I don't know, leaning forward at this point that you could just, because we're so close, that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
like if
Because
you're inside minimum or something.
it's
Yeah,
that,
I mean,
it's that weird thing where you don't want to get in someone's heads with the technical, but it's also,
Right.
we have a very technical job that has to be done. So how do you decide who to talk to and how?
I think a lot of times it's remarkably clear, and you don't need any help reading any room. Somebody's either this or that. There's the people on the extreme ends.
Uh-huh.
Um, Otherwise, though, you observe, you watch and don't speak for a while, and then like I would only really approach an actor in a very specific circumstance, or if we're kind of socializing between setups or something, and then you establish I think it's nice to establish relationships with everyone on the set, no matter who they are, including actors. I think actors are probably some of the people that I probably get to know the least on a job, because there is sort of this respect level, and it isn't, we're not supposed to be there palling around all the time, but if that's invited, okay, great. Yes, this helps the camaraderie in general. And there's definitely the people who are like, don't you effing look at me, get that out of my face, whatever. Please don't be in my eye line, which is absolutely, fine. I mean, most of the time these days, a focus puller is probably not even in the room. And it eliminates a lot of that hassle, if you want to call it a hassle. Like I'm not in anybody's way. Nobody has to tell me that they can see me. Just I have limited time to make sure I'm doing my task properly. And let me just be over here so I don't have to worry about who else I can possibly be bothering.
Do you prefer to be in the room if you can?
I like to be in the room and by the camera, because you can see, I like to pay attention to when the camera's moving. And I also just like to stay as involved as I can and be present. And it's a little more fun on set. But if I do have to approach somebody, I'll just do it very sort of humbly and softly and just be like, hey, I'm Liza again. I don't know if you're blah, blah, blah. And maybe, this A, B, or C. Or, if I'm at all concerned, I'll have the operator or the first AD have that communication on my behalf. That's actually, I think, probably the best way to do it initially. And then once somebody learns your name, once an actor call me by my name, I feel like I can approach them as well.
Gotcha. And do you read the script, a couple times during the show, or you read
Absolutely,
the sides, or what do you?
I read the scripts when they come out, and then I read the sides each day, of course. Yes, essential. I learned that on Longmire. Just, we if they're talking, they had to be in focus, which is going from a Coen Brothers film where you're on somebody for coverage to go to that. It's just like, God, what is this? What are we doing? This is an abomination. But it's like, they're talking. If, as Jimmy would say, if their lips are flapping, they need to be sharp. So
that's the job. Yeah.
And so that also adds a layer of challenge and fun. And I actually think that when I'm wearing the context, that I feel like I can get into the scene better. And I feel like I do a better job if I have the context in. The
context, listening to their dialogue, actually.
Correct.
Now, that said, you do that obviously when you're out of the room. If you're in the room, do you take it off and just listen to them in real time, or you still?
No, I put it into, because I like being able to hear, like a lot of times an actor will take a big breath in before they're going to take a step. You can hear the cup move before they, there's all these audio cues of their movement. And if I can have one more millisecond of advance on them leaning in or the item being thrown, it's all the more helpful. So I find sound incredibly helpful for focus pulling.
So you start a show, and you've been doing your job for a while, and you're great at it. And there's a brand new operator coming in. What are the do's and don'ts for them? That are not that you're going to tell them what to do, but like, they obviously, the reality is they don't know as much about their job as you know about their job, most likely. And no matter what, they're probably going to be, scared, for lack of a better word. So how do you try to work with someone like that? So, because there's got to be that thing of not being overbearing, but also being helpful, but not being too, it's that whole thing, right?
I think that it's a lot of patience sometimes. This doesn't happen often, but when it does, here's the thing. They have earned by some means the right to be there, and we are all learning all the time, including myself.
That's
and
great.
You have to remind yourself of that. And sometimes it's hard, especially when you're in a show where you're hammering stuff out. And, it's like the new director comes in and it's their first day of the episode and they're like, "Wah, blah, blah," and you're like, dude, we just finished an 8-day episode. This is just another day for us, And when a new person can come in, sometimes there's this almost like, how do you not know the flow of things? But how could they know the flow of things? So it's just being patient, giving everybody the requisite couple of days or weeks to like get into the flow of a show, to remember that they're learning, to make suggestions, sometimes maybe in the form of a question. You sometimes, there's a weird line of like, they have to make their own mistakes, but you're a team. Your whole camera is, you want your whole camera team to succeed. And I don't want us to have a crappy shot, but if we frame something up that isn't great, that has to sort of fall on the shoulders of, that's not my business. I'm there to keep it sharp, build it, move it when we need to move it to the next scene. Yeah. I think just having patience and the only times I would ever make a suggestion would be more of like a physical thing. Like, hey, do you want a riser over here? Or I see you're reaching for this. Maybe you want this handle. Like, I'll sometimes go over and configure the camera when I see them struggling with a physical position of operating or something. Because if they're not asking for it or doing themselves, I don't know if they know that it's even possible to do. And as you know very well, sometimes just getting comfortable and being able to physically move the thing where you need to move it is the biggest the job of operating. Yeah. So well, and I think it's also mostly with courtesy things like that. Otherwise, sure. I don't get too involved in their choices.
No, that's actually great, because I think also, I think when you're a new operator, there's something about, you don't want to ask too many things because you're worried that people might not think you know what you're doing, and asking questions or asking for constantly changing things or whatever. But you said something really interesting. You said offering suggestions in the form of a question. And I'm now thinking back and thinking, wait a minute.
How many questions did she ask me?
She wasn't asking me all those questions. Dave, do you really think we should be right here? And yeah, no, but I like that. But it is. I work with John Lindley a lot, and I have this joke that he's never actually asked me a question. He makes statements and his voice goes up at the end. You think we should be on a longer lens here? He's not interested whether I think we should be on a longer lens.
It's like speaking Italian,
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly right. No, that's great. That's and I mean, for that reason, anybody new who's working with you would be lucky.
I did learn that here in New Mexico. Probably one of the better lessons is I was on a TV show, and somebody who had been a second bumped up to be an operator, and he was brought in on our show. And I think a lot of people were just like, what the heck? He's bumped up already. Oh my gosh. And our key first gave him every courtesy of the most professional operator in existence. And we all took cues from him. The key first was Gabe Pfeiffer, and he was incredibly polite to this kid that I think other people were willing to just be like, fuck this guy. And we all took a page out of that playbook, I think, and noticed that that's our job. Our job is to be there to support this person and this shot being completed. And what more than courtesy and politeness to give somebody confidence? You could do 1,000 things to rattle somebody, but that's not even on anybody. Why would you even do that? We are there to support this person, and in supporting them and giving them everything that they deserve, it comes back around to us, and ideally those that help us as well. So I'm not saying I was an asshole before that moment. I'm just saying in this particular moment, from that moment forward, I have remembered that and always been taken that sort of followed Gabe's example in that. It was really
that's great.
A very professional and human thing to do that really went a long way.
That's fantastic.
Person. And then he had a great day operating, and he had no reason to believe that he didn't do a good job because everyone was on his side. And, the director would have told him if he had any issues, but beyond that, we were all there for him. And you have to be, because we're all going to be in that chair one day, and we want that same kind of support.
Yeah. And it doesn't surprise me at all that was Gabe, because I've worked with Gabe, and that's exactly who he is. He's a fantastic focus puller and a great human being.
Yes,
so I totally get it. So it's a good segue into the fact that you are moving into operating. But is it the kind of thing where, because I'm guessing you probably could have done this much sooner. I'm sure you could have. Is it the kind of thing like when you said you were done with loading, you're sort of like, you know what, I it's time for something new and to challenge myself? Is that pretty much what makes the decision?
It has become more of that. It started out as it's something I've always, I've wanted to operate and shoot.
Yeah,
for sure. But there's also a part of me that's like, but there's also this path through the ranks and doing all the jobs that I feel is incredibly important. I love knowing the jobs below me inside and out because I've done them. And I think that there's some importance to that, not necessity to move up, but I think it's really helpful. And there's also, there are fewer operators on a show than there are assistants sometimes, not focus pullers specifically, but I think it's a harder jump to make. And it's one that for me has involved thinking about, if I stay as a first, knock on wood, I could work a lot more consistently than maybe if I became an operator. And so, on the note of groceries versus art kind of thing, it's like, if I make this jump, am I shooting myself in the foot? And am I going to suffer somehow? We've all grown accustomed to a certain level of knowing what we're going to earn a year. And this feels like a risk. And maybe those are the exact words that mean, hey, you're ready to take a leap, like get out of your comfort zone. So for me, I think it was a bit more of I've had kind of a crazy last 6 years of my life, and it's actually been really helpful to have the stability of my job. And so that's kind of kept me where I'm at as well, is just choosing stability and familiarity. And I've gotten into a place where I've formed a crew of people that I like. I've brought a lot of women into the camera department, and we've got a good thing going, and I've enjoyed doing that. I enjoy the management part of it. I enjoy all these things. And so there's been a little of like, oh, do I want to let go of being that involved? And the answer is, now that I've had the opportunity to start operating, I don't miss any of that anymore. Really? I mean, it's weird because you're not on the walkie anymore. And that's so weird because so much of your life on Channel 6 is just the camaraderie and the jokes and the bullshit and the knowing what's going on. And then now there's just this silence behind me. And I'm like, God, I don't know what's going on. And you just see people moving around and you're like, oh my God, why did I know that was going to happen? And you're like, oh yeah, wow. you're not there anymore.
I was going to ask you that, are you able to turn that part of your brain on? I mean, it's probably somewhat easy because you've got a whole new thing to think about, but are you able to like look at an assistant who's your first, who's not maybe doing it the way you would do it and go, they got to do it the way they do it. That's not my thing anymore.
Yeah, I haven't had that experience. I thankfully actually don't. I work with many amazing focus pullers so far here. And it's like, that's great. Keeping something in focus is not the problem. It's usually like I'm futzing with the camera or the build. And I'm like, Liza, take your hands off. Or like, one of the first times I was operating, on a larger show, like they called for a lens and I just got up out of the seat and went and took the matte box off. And I'm just like, it's like, Liza, it's just, you know what I mean? It's just such a like innate response.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Liza, so I literally would just take 10 steps back from the camera when they call for a lens change. And I'd be like, Liza, you got to like turn that off. And it's hard to do. But it makes sense,
right? Because some of it's Pavlovian. I mean, there's no question about it.
So it's more like build things than act like focus pulling. I'm more like, and then somebody will come and do something for me and I'll be like, God, this feels weird. I can adjust my own eyepiece leveler.
Let me let you in a little secret. Like a year from now, you'll go, I don't remember how to adjust the eyepiece leveler. Someone else did. Like you're going to forget everything. It's amazing how quickly you're like, I don't need that anymore. And I'm moving on.
Insert operator joke here.
Yeah, I've told this story before.
Can somebody get me my coffee, please?
Exactly. I've told this story before, but the first thing I ever directed, like big thing, was ER, and I directed it. And last day, I actually got sick, and I ended up in the hospital. But so I was off for like 2 days, and then I came back, and I was doing Steadicam, and the first shot that we were up, Chris Chulak was directing, and I got up there with the Steadicam and they rolling and this and that, and I said, and action, and he looked around the corner and everybody kind of looked at me and he's like, Dave, it's all right, I'm gonna take care of that now. And I was like, oh, I'm so embarrassed.
Yeah.
And he goes, nah, it's fine. But it
Right.
does, that stuff gets in your mind. So what do you think the biggest hurdle of making that jump is for you? And I'm not talking like wheels or panning or tilting or something like that, just the difference in the job.
It's still very new for me. I'm about to start my first full-time job. It's all been day playing up until this point. I think just basic confidence. I have been really lucky so far that I show up and I know most everybody on set, and people are kind and they're like, hey, it's about time and great to see you here. And people are,
That's
and I'm
cool.
just like, oh my God, like I'm sort of an internally shy person. So any sort of attention like that is uncomfortable. But at the same time, that means all the world to me. And it's all you need is one person being like, hey, you did all right. That was great.
Yeah.
And so just trusting my instincts. I've been looking through a camera my whole life. I've been looking through somebody else's camera for the rest of my life, watching operating happen and, pulling focus on the most amazing, I've been able to work with some of the most amazing people that I've always looked up to. So I feel like I have a sense of an aesthetic that I find pleasing and good and right is kind of a weird word to use, and just trusting that my eye is a good eye and going with that. And I find that that's when I also have the most fun. And there's going to be times when somebody corrects your framing or says, actually, no, we just need this piece so there's those two parts of operating, especially on B, I'm gathering, is that there's a very functional and purposeful part of it where you're filling in some gaps. But then there's another part where you're also in that process still wanting to pull something out of your hat that is beautiful to look at. And it's procedural. Maybe we're just doing coverage, reverse coverage. It's not always going to be that. But so I think the challenge is just trusting that my choices are good choices.
Yeah.
But
I think that's
yeah.
You're right on there. And I'll tell you, one of the big things that took me forever, and I think takes a lot of people forever, is, you come and you land a frame, and then there's that thing of going, maybe I should be a little to the left, or maybe I should be, but it's like that, just land the frame. And like you said, there's no right frame. I mean, there's stuff that's bad, obviously, you don't want to see it. If there's a lamp in there, maybe you wait for the offline and you move it over so they have it or something like that. But I notice that newer operators will constantly be going, they're constantly adjusting and adjusting. It's just like, just let it sit
Let it live. Yeah.
which I think is the hardest thing to do, because it comes down to, like you were saying, it comes down to trusting. And it's not that I've nailed the perfect frame, but that this frame works and it tells the story, and maybe I'll adjust it on the next one or something like that. But
I think what I'm looking forward to is, there was a time as a focus puller where we would be setting up a shot and I'd be like, oh, this is going to be a hard one. This walk up, or this is usually some sort of long lens thing. I'm like, oh, this is going to be tricky. And then there were times when you're like, whatever, this is the shot and we're doing it. And I think now I don't want to set myself up and be like, oh, this is this, I'm scared of stand-ups. I'm nervous about,
So am I.
I stand-ups just fucking make me nervous. And I'm like, oh God. So just to get to the point where I can just it's practice, it's repetition, it's practice, it's making some mistakes. So I want to get to the point where something as basic as somebody getting up out of their chair isn't going to make me get a nervous stomach before we.
Yeah, if it happens, feel free to let me know how you pulled it off, because it just.
Yeah.
I mean, because the thing is, it's not. There are no two actors who stand up the same.
Yeah.
and there are no and many actors. Some are great. I mean, some will stand up and as soon as it cuts, they'll look over and they go, I totally screwed you on. I'm so sorry. But then what you do is you start to realize, and you probably know this, I'm sure you as a focus puller, this is like, there are tells that a lot of them will do and whatever. And then there's the other thing that took me a while to learn, because when I was starting, a lot of people didn't give you a lot of help because they didn't necessarily want you to succeed. Not that I'm bitter, but
I don't sense it at all.
When they're standing up, there's the down position and there's the up position. And what you do a lot of times, if people are rocketing, is you find the frame of the up position. It's like, oh, I'm just cutting into the ceiling at the top of the frame. And you forget about them and you go to that and you just hope / know that they're going to be in that frame.
Okay, I'm glad you're saying that, because I've been doing that and I'm like, holy shit.
Look, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on what they do with their torso. It depends on so many different things. I mean, on ER, I said this before, but I'll never forget it. First day that I worked with Eric LaSalle, he had to stand up from a chair, and he came over and he said, "You're going to remember this day because it's the first time you had to stand Eric LaSalle up." And it's not because he's doing any, like, he's trying not to almost, but he does this. He has a very long torso, which that changes a lot of things. And he just has this scoop that's just this. And thankfully, Steve Robertson, my Dolly Group, knew about it. And he goes, just hang on, I'll get you there. And and he just got me up and it was fine. And it was, but it was, that was one of the harder things I've ever had to do.
Yeah.
and then the other thing is sometimes you don't get it, I'm sorry, I need another one, and you hope but at least you're worried about something that everybody's worried about. And I've done stand-ups my whole career, obviously. And at some point you'll be saying the same thing because you do them. And most of them are fine. But then you can do it for 15 years and come up against an actor where you just cannot figure out the physics of what they're doing. And then usually
up until the end of Focus Pulling too, there's some actors who stand up in like a circle position. They go out and in, and it's the last thing you're thinking of doing. And, you're just like, God damn, I can't wait till we get this. Yeah.
Yep. But, and that's where I think you do read the room. And if it's the type of actor who can do it, you can go, hey, is there any chance you can, come up a little slower for me? I'm having trouble staying up with you or whatever. Most of the good ones will actually understand what's going on. And again, if it's someone like Eric Sal, who's got a big torso and that's what's happening, he knows what the problem is. And so
sometimes you just need to show them the frame. And when it's like this, they'll be like, got it.
They try to help you.
And often when the operator, as I noticed this as a focus puller too, often when the operator would be asking for a little help, it would inherently help what I was doing too.
Yeah. And sometimes, by the way, you're asking for a little help because the focus puller is having such a tough time.
I noticed that when I was working with you, and I was like, that's a pro move right there.
Yeah, when I would go up and go, hey, I'm perfectly fine and can nail this, but my assistant cannot do it. So could you come up slower?
You guys. Yeah.
But
that's
also that's one of the other weird things, and I'm sure you've seen it, and I'm sure you've done it actually before. Is like sometimes you take one for the team, right? And when you're new at, it's not even operating. When you're new at any job, it's a little harder to take one for the team because you feel like you got to prove yourself over and over and over again. So, you get to that point where you're comfortable enough to do that. And I think that's one of those litmus tests where you go, oh, I'm like comfortable in my job now because I just threw myself under the bus in order to help the team. What about working with the dolly grip? Like, because the thing is, unlike in the past, because you sort of alluded to this, in the past you were sitting on the dolly, right? And now I know you work with the dolly grip and as assistant, but not the same way as an operator does. You're not sitting there anymore. Yeah. Has that been a learning experience for you or? Again,
it's still pretty new. And I haven't done any long-term jobs. So I haven't had the opportunity to develop a very long-term relationship with the dolly grip, which I know is absolutely essential. But the longer runs of day playing that I've done, it's been kind of a joy. Again, it's people that I've already known as a focus puller. As a focus puller, you're also pretty tight with the dolly grip because you're building the camera together. Sometimes they can be your nemesis or your best friend, and it's, they help you as much as anybody. It can be really an important person even for you as a first. And so I at least have the relationship with these people where I know them. And so that goes a long way. But I think my official answer to that question at this point is I'm still learning, but certainly communicating, not changing your mind too many times in terms of positioning and what you need. I don't like making anybody do more work than they need to, no matter what job I'm in. So, and I'm keenly aware of their gear is 18,000 times heavier than most people's gear. And they're the last person I need to move something that they don't need to move. And I know that can ingratiate a lot of trust and camaraderie when we pick something, we stick with it. But then while we're actually doing the shot, I'm reliant on them in a huge way. And when we pull it off, it's a shared success. Like I like when we both celebrate that we got it, we did it. Yay.
Yeah.
good day, good work, thank you. It's I'll get back to you on the details. I'm sure.
When do
I'm
you
sure
when
I'll
do you
learn.
start your show?
Middle of October
And how long does it go for?
till the middle of March.
That's, first of all, I'm jealous.
Yeah, no,
That's great. Well,
I'm looking
and it
forward
also,
to boot camp. I'm looking forward to operating boot camp.
that's fantastic. And
Yeah.
and it's your B camera on a 2-camera show, or okay? Do you know the A camera operator?
Yeah,
Okay,
Brian
and
Nordman.
then it also, I have to assume it helps being in New Mexico, right? Because it's a small community and you all kind of know each other, as opposed to like New York or LA, where you might walk in and know, you might walk in and know nobody. I mean, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah,
'Cause
we definitely have a smaller pool of people, and it's really nice to always know somebody on set.
Yeah.
Always, if not 80% of the crew. It's really
That's what
really
I
sweet.
figured.
It's very
Yeah.
sweet, and it's really what makes this place special and other maybe smaller markets special.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm grateful for that.
And is there, do you, and I'll preface this, I'm not sure. I know at one point it was definitely this way, and I'm wondering if it is still this way. Is there a little part of a mental game that I'm a new operator and obviously I want to do well because everybody wants to do well, but also I'm a female operator and I sort of don't want to fail because I want to make sure that people realize that women can do this? Or is that still part of the game?
For this entire interview, Dave, I hadn't even remembered that I was a woman until now. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think,
blew it. I blew it.
No, that is a fair question. And it's an important question. And I think one thing that's maybe gotten me through a lot of my life is that I kind of forget that I am sometimes. I've been lucky in how I've been treated. I am a bit of a tomboy, so I get on with guys as well as anybody. And so in that realm, I don't necessarily feel differently. There have been times, actually just towards the end of my focus pulling career, where I was just starting to actually, again, notice. I was like, oh, I am being treated differently by this production manager or
Oh, really?
this
Okay.
thing. It was usually in the realm of producers or production management with me, because I'm determining like, this is the package that we need. This is what I need for staff. And I was getting a lot of pushback, and I was just like, you know what? Like, why have you hired me if you don't want to trust me for this? And it started to feel sometimes like it was maybe a thing like that. So it was,
No, but I'll tell you this, the fact that you have to think about it makes me very happy, because obviously it's not, in other words, the answer was like, oh, totally. I have to constantly think about that. And granted, maybe
Right.
that's just you, but even the fact that, because 10 years ago, that would not, the answer,
no.
the answer
And-
would have been like, yeah,
No.
we're all on the block,
And most of my female mentors have a very different story. And I,
100%.
most of the female operators and DPs that I know and love now, like their stories are so fucking different. And it's
Yeah.
heartbreaking to hear from them,
Yep.
and it's also almost fuel to keep moving forward as if there was no difference,
Yes.
and to just make that our norm. And, that is what representation does. That is what having a bunch of, I remember even when I started to see like more like female electricians, I was just like, this is so fucking cool. Like, number one, I'm noticing it. I wish I wasn't noticing it, but I am. Or a female director, or for God's sakes, at one point, like an African-American first AD, like, geez, like what, like, oh my gosh, these things shouldn't stand out, but like, it's a, yes, I want to do a good job because I am Liza Bambenek and I don't want to get fired.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I am critically aware that there are many people who could have my job right now. There's a lot of people not working, and I feel very lucky to have a job upcoming. And none of those people have ever made me feel anything other than an equal to them. And I would hate to
That's
think
great.
that was a reason, but for the sake of just all females that I've ever worked with, I want to do a good job. I want to make them proud. I want to, I want to be there. I want to be there and be invisible and blend in and do
Exactly.
my work. And I don't need to stand out because I'm male or female or not. And like,
that's great. That's exactly
Yeah.
what it should be. And like
Yeah.
you sort of alluded to this, but it seems to me like those people who are your mentors, they did all that work so that
Totally.
you could get to the
100%.
point where you're like, I don't even think about this. This isn't a thing.
100%. And it's I almost have a small amount of like, oh my God, is it okay that I feel okay?
Yeah.
You know, because
I get it.
I came up hearing so many horrible stories, and
Sure.
it was never something to be like, men are horrible, forget this system. It was always just like, hang in there. It might be tough. If it's tough, don't recognize it as anything other than you're absolutely supposed to be there. That doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
don't
great.
don't let it deter. Yeah.
And it's like I said, I'm so happy to hear you say that, because it's proof that it's proof that the marks have moved, or the goalposts have moved, or whatever you say.
Yeah.
I don't know what I don't
think,
follow any sports.
I think what also has moved is the ability for, I think a lot of people suffered in silence, so to speak, for a long time. You just put up with shit. I mean, I put up with certain amounts of shit. You know, I once got a job and somebody was just like, you look like my sister. And I'm like, oh, great. Are you kidding me? Number one, that's
what does that
weird.
even mean?
Number one, that's two. And number one, that's weird. And number two, that's weird, you know?
Oh,
but
boy.
like, yeah, I just think I lost my train of thought by telling a really dumb joke.
No, that was great. No, because the funny thing is like, if I stood and heard that and someone walked away, I would probably turn to you and go, what did that even, like, what does that mean? Is that like, is that a positive thing? Is that a negative thing? That's just kind of skeetchy. Yeah, that's a little strange.
I am, again,
That's
lucky to be where I am because of a lot of time. And what I was going to say is like, what is different now too is I feel as if somebody did make someone feel uncomfortable for a very inappropriate reason, I feel like there are now actually the grounds to have that conversation. I'm not saying go to HR directly, but I feel like there are now the grounds for people to be like, hey, you know what? What you just did there is not okay.
Yep.
And I'm coming to you because I want us to all get along. Yep. And, you know, whereas before somebody would have just maybe suffered in silence over it. So I feel like at least there are channels with which people can communicate. And nobody ever wants something to go to an HR case. I've never had to deal with one for myself ever.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that. I feel like we should be able to approach one another. And now it's also just like, hey, be on your best behavior. Be a professional. Like it's 2024. We don't need to be like what you just said. Maybe in 1930, that would have been, hey, script girl, blah, blah, blah. You know, like, no. But like now it's like, come on, grow up.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, we've created a world that for the most part, that isn't even acceptable anymore. Yeah. And it takes people calling it out for it to be that way. And it takes people to have changed themselves for it to be that way. So those two things are now way more present than when I started my career 25 years ago.
Which is great, which is absolutely great. Well, I wish you the best of luck on your show. I'm excited to hear after you've done it, how it went. I will give you one piece of invaluable, I'm going to say, advice that I think will probably serve you well is if you do screw up, which is going to happen because I still screw up, don't beat yourself up and then just turn to everybody and go, I just want to throw out there that none of you know what the deepest body of water in North America is. So let's let's all be okay for a second. And if you want, I'll tell you that later, but I'm just saying you don't have all the answers. So, I keep that in your hip pocket. And if you pull it out one day, I want you to text me and go, it worked. They all bowed down to me now.
I'm gonna get that tattooed on my thigh. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that.
But that is the one thing that I tell all people who are starting out. It's like, God, I was doing a Steadicam course a little while ago that I was helping teach with Buzz Moyer and a bunch of other people, and we had like just a Q&A night, and one of the students went, "Did you ever like just finish a shot, you put the Steadicam down, and you go, wow, I just nailed that," and I was like, whoa. That's no, I never buzzed. And he's like, God, that would be great. Like, does that happen? And everybody had the same thing. And it's like, look, dude, I may finish a shot and be happy with it, but I guarantee you that driving home, I'm going to go, oh, I just figured it out. Like it's never good enough. And so I think that that's what most people have to understand. Look, if you're good, and I know you will be like this, is you're always trying to make it better. And if you're always trying to make it better, then you're not celebrating what worked. Yeah. You're basically going, how can I make this better? Why are they moving on? Because I can make it better. But the reality is they're moving on because they're happy, you know?
Yeah. It's subjective. It's all subjective, you know?
It's all subjective.
It's like that. What did Edward Murch, the editor of that book. It was like, there's 1,000 ways to point a camera, but really only one.
Yep.
You know, it's like, yeah.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. Thank you so much. I'm going to leave you with the question that I ask everybody, and you can just take us out, which is, what advice would you have for someone getting into the business today on how to succeed? And or Liza Bambenek talking to Liza Bambenek, I don't know, 20 years ago or whatever it was, on what you wish you knew.
I think it's very basic. I think when people are always like, oh, how'd you get into the film industry? I'm always just like, don't worry about getting in, worry about getting out. But, you know, it'll be like 10 in the morning and somebody will bring me a little snack or something. And just the tiniest little things, I'm like, this is actually like, I have so many things on my mind right now. Like ultimately, as you're working and when you're starting out, the people above you have their brains full of all kinds of things that they're forgetting to do the most basic things like eat and drink water. And sometimes the tiniest gestures go the longest way. Just a simple, let me give you a beverage. Let me give you water. Let me offer you something. Let me assure you that we've got your back. And it's just sometimes the smallest thing. And you don't need to have been on 18,000 movie sets to know how to do that. You just need to be a human being who's paying attention and caring. And it goes a long way. Be kind, be curious, pay attention, ask questions, be organized, and learn how to make a good fucking cup of tea.
I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. We'll be back soon with another great episode. Don't forget to check us out on theop.io for all sorts of information on operating and storytelling. So thanks for listening and have a great day.